So Olavarri was interesting for me because it was my first area, so I couldn't really speak Spanish at all. I said like 5 words or memorized a couple phrases from the Preach My Gospel. And so I showed up there, and my mission companion had traveled with me after, we got to the mission home and everything. She was able to ride with me because she had just had transfers as well. So it was really hard for us at first because we opened up that area for sisters. So there had already been elders there and everything, and the branch was doing great, but they hadn't had sisters in a while. And so it was really hard to gain the trust of the members because they were so used to elders and everything. And what was also really hard was that we didn't really have any investigators at all. We had no place to start. We had an old area book, and so we would try to go through and find old investigators and everything, but it was really hard for us to just start the work in our area. But it was also really amazing for me to be in that area because, the elders obviously helped us a lot, and my district leader was in my ward, and so we shared an area, so they helped us a ton. But at the same time, they helped us so much to find investigators, and then we also helped teach their investigators. Like if they were ever struggling to teach a certain doctrine of the gospel, they would ask us sisters to help them because we're obviously more spiritual. No. But so they would ask us to help them, and so we would have a crazy lesson where we'd have a couple investigators and then 4 missionaries, and so it could seem kind of intimidating, but it wasn't, just because we were all so, down to earth and cool and everything. But I remember one time, it was one of the first lessons that we taught them. The elders were struggling to teach the doctrine of baptism and why baptism by the proper authority of God is so important, and why baptism in another church isn't actually valid and everything. And they just could not get the investigator to understand the point of the doctrine. And so they brought us in, and we were teaching this investigator, and we were in the church building, and we opened up the door to the baptismal font. And so it was so cool to see that they were looking at the baptismal font and where they could be baptized. And then one of the elders actually took the investigator down into the baptismal font and showed him what would be happening, at his baptism and everything. And the Spirit was just so strong because we were talking about baptism, and that's just a spiritual topic, by itself. But at the same time, it was so cool for me to watch all these missionaries teaching so many different aspects of baptism and how important it is. And then they all kind of turned to me for my turn to testify, and I was like, I don't even know how to say anything right now. I was just enjoying the lesson, watching and everything, and then it was my turn to testify. And so I tried my best to just mutter out some broken Spanish testimony about baptism, and I know for a fact I used the wrong conjugation of baptism every time I said the word. And so I'm sure he didn't understand my actual Spanish, but because I just jumped in just praying and just hoping the Spirit would be with me, even though I was not speaking correct Spanish at all. The Spirit was so strong, and it testified to him. And after that lesson, he accepted a baptismal date, and then he got baptized, and it was so amazing for me. So that was a really, really special experience for me because even though it wasn't my investigator, I was there and I was able to testify to him and then watch him enter into the waters of baptism. So that was a really special area for me because it was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. I'm on a mission, we're baptizing people, and it was so amazing. But that area was really interesting for me just because it was my first. I was learning all the different things. I was learning about how to take taxis because I had never done that before. And I was learning about all the safety rules about crossing train tracks and crossing busy streets and everything because they don't have crosswalks or lights or anything like that. They don't even have stop signs really in Argentina, ever. And it's not like you have roundabouts down there. You just approach a corner, and if no one's coming, you just go for it. And so it was sometimes really dangerous to cross streets, and so it was kind of just the culture shock area for me where I was learning everything about Argentina. But it was so amazing just because we would, meet up with the members, and they were just so strong down there. It was a pretty small branch, and they were in this district that was across so many different cities because none of the branches were big enough to become a ward, and so they couldn't become a stake or anything. And so there wasn't a ton of people filling up the church every Sunday, but the people that were there were so faithful and just had such strong testimonies, and rain or shine, they were in church on Sundays. And so it was so amazing to see that their faith and, how much they were, willing to go through with the church and how much they wanted to help us find people to teach. So that was very interesting for me because I couldn't speak Spanish, and I obviously had no idea about the city or even how to navigate a city in Argentina. But my companion, she was awesome. She taught me a lot about patience and about perseverance. But one thing she couldn't teach me a lot about was Spanish, just because she didn't know any English, and so it was really hard for her to teach me about Spanish. And so my hardest challenge in that area was my language, because I didn't really feel like I was improving at all. I seriously felt like my language actually went down when I was in my first area because I was so frustrated, and I just I don't know, maybe I wasn't studying the right things or something. But I would talk to these American elders, and they would, give me advice and everything. But I remember just being so fed up with my companion because she would lose patience with me and then just call an American elder and be like, translate this for me. And I was like, no, you need to figure out a way to tell me yourself. But so it was really good for me because we only spoke Spanish. And so even though I didn't understand half of it, I was trying. But it was so amazing to see how I could just push forward. And even though I couldn't talk to my companion half of the time, I just prayed and be like, all right, just help me to say this one thing to her because I need to tell her what's going on, So it was really hard, probably one of my hardest areas, but definitely one of the most memorable just because I learned so much and I grew so much from my first area. But yeah.